I now invite Amaan to continue the case for the opposition.
Mr. President, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak in this debate. Members of the House, I must start by calling out the unique unfairness of this motion, in that it places the burden on the victims for the systematic injustice and war crimes that they have suffered and that have been inflicted upon them in not just the last few months, but for the last 75 years, while completely exonerating the victims, exonerating their oppressors. Now, that is not to say that what happened on October 7th was not tragic, or that Israeli hostages must not return home. It is also to say, in addition to that, that all hostages, detainees of this conflict, those who have been tortured, assaulted and separated from their families and homes must return home. This must be true for those Israelis and those foreigners held by Hamas, but also for this 9,500 Palestinian political prisoners held in Israeli jails. There's over 3,600 Palestinians being held in Israeli jails without charge or trial. Those Palestinian children in Israeli jails being subject to starvation, abuse, and inhuman treatment. Our case as the opposition tonight has been clear. We do not disregard the failings and responsibilities of the Palestinian Authority or the larger Palestinian leadership towards the Palestinians. But we also recognize that the Palestinian Authority enjoys all but an observer status at the United Nations. Its funds are strained and controlled by Israel time and time again, and it faces a military occupational threat as it does now. And that simply there is no comparison between the actions of Israel and the omissions of the Palestinian leadership on any scales of proportionality, of justice or rationality for us to tonight conclude that the Palestinian leadership is the greatest barrier to peace. Now, importantly, if we are to indulge ourselves in truthfully assessing not just what happened in the last few months, but what has happened for the last 75 years, going all the way back to the Nakba, to that first exercise of ethnic cleansing inflicted upon Palestinians, to multiple wars that have taken place so far, the multiple occupations and continuing occupations of Palestinian territory, the settler colonialism encouraged by Israel, which the ICJ has not just recognized but also ruled as unlawful, not on one but multiple occasions. And all of this has not been at the hands of the Palestinian leadership, it has been at the hands of Israel. So when our opposition recalls when Israel offered the Palestinians 100% of Gaza, I think it's a bit privileged to occupy, to settle, colonize a land and then offer it to the people. And then the opposition also suggested that why doesn't Egypt open its doors to those in Gaza? Well, imagine what the opposition is suggesting here. That we will occupy, that we will colonize, and then expect a third country to open their doors to those suffering. Our case as the opposition is clear. That the Palestinians demand a free determination of their rights. Their right to self-determination, as they are a free people to their own land, not something that is offered to them after it's been occupied. Now let's talk about Hamas. Let's talk about Hamas, and this is not to say that Hamas is not a terrorist organization or that it is not guilty of war crimes. The ICC chief prosecutor has included Hamas leaders in his arrest warrant. But let's go back to 1967, since the opposition is so fascinated with historic timelines. Israel encouraged in 1967, in its occupation of Gaza in 1967, the Islamist terrorist movement of Sheikh Yassin and the Muslim Brotherhood, founding the precursor organization to Hamas, financing it, funding projects. Hamas was created by the state of Israel. And why? All to offer a counterweight to the secular, moderate Fatah party. And this is not me saying it. Brigadier General Yitzhak Segev categorically acknowledged, and this was a military official posted in Gaza at that time, acknowledged Israel's role in financing Sheikh Yassin's movement, while Avner Cohen, an Israeli official responsible for religious affairs at that time, said, quote unquote, Hamas, to my great regret, is Israel's creation. Now, who is the barrier to peace? In the height of hypocrisy, just after Netanyahu stood at the podium of the United Nations General Assembly and celebrated Israel as an alleged pioneer of peace in the Middle East, Israeli missiles were fired at Beirut, expanding Israel's military oppression to Lebanon. And what has also gone quite unnoticed all this while is Israeli missiles being fired at Syria, killing all but innocent lives, destroying all but civilian infrastructure. And not just civilian infrastructure, UN infrastructure. Because in Lebanon, the IDF fired at UNIFIL, a UN organization, its permanent outpost, and attacked UN peacekeepers in what the UN recognized as being deliberately demolished. And now Israel has moved to ban UNRWA, a UN organization, not just any UN organization, but the largest and the biggest aid agency in the Gaza Strip.
There were 10 UNRWA officials that were part of October 7th that had been declared and identified. So why should they not ban it?
Alright, thank you so much for that question. This has been investigated by UNRWA, and immediately those 10 officials on suspicion were fired, and today we have the commissioner of UNRWA before the United Nations in New York begging for this to stop because the Israelis have simply not provided evidence for their suspicions, while these officials, I'm not taking that, while these officials have been fired simply based on Israeli suspicions without evidence. And the reaction from the Israelis is to ban the biggest aid agency in Gaza. And what does that do? That just worsens the humanitarian crisis that Israel has created and makes it more and more difficult to deliver aid for those suffering. Israel is very well known to be very uncooperative when it comes to creating humanitarian corridors, when it comes to delivering aid in Gaza. A member of the opposition seemed to suggest that there is no apartheid in Israel. There are over 65 laws in Israel that directly or indirectly discriminate against Arabs. While Palestinian citizens are effectively blocked from leasing 80% of land, Palestinians and their descendants have no legal right to return if they've been displaced in 1948 or 1967. And the nation-state law in Israel passed in 2018 states that the right to exercise national self-determination in Israel is quote-unquote unique to the Jewish people. And what does this cycle of war, of hate and violence from Israel achieve when Palestinians are called animals by Israeli officials, or when in its grotesque misuse of the Torah, Netanyahu calls Amalek to destroy all that they have, all men and women of Gaza, when Netanyahu quotes the Bible, quotes the Torah in that degree, what does this do? This only threatens the security of Jews and the security of Israel for a very long time to come. And it's not me saying this. It's Amy Aylon, a former head of Israel's Secret Service, categorically said, if we refuse peace, what awaits us will be even more violent than October 7th. I'm just about to conclude, sorry.
Good time.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, Gaza lies in 40 million tons of rubble. 40,000 innocent civilian lives have been lost, and nearly 2 million people are at the brink of starvation. I urge you to vote for the opposition. Thank you.